Okay, so we've more or less proven that Link didn't die before the events of Majora's Mask, or even during. So the questions that remain are, what happened to him, and how did he die? On page 113, it states that many years had passed after the events of Ocarina of Time before Ganondorf was executed. However, on page 110, it states that only months had passed between the events of Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. It is because of this that I believe that Link continued his journey to find Navi for some time, possibly years, before either finding Navi or just giving up. It is during this time that he returns to Hyrule and finds a wife, possibly Malon, given how Link in Twilight Princess is a ranch hand, has a child, but dies before the child is old enough for him to be taught the hero's secrets. Thus, the bloodline of the hero continues. Now, I could stop here, but there is actually some small bit of evidence that Link may have died under not so peaceful conditions. Take note of the story the sages tell in Twilight Princess. Given what is said here, it can mean one of three things. It refers to the war that occurs before the events of Ocarina of Time. Ganondorf escapes from custody prior to his execution and leads the Gerudo in an all-out invasion of Hyrule, or both. If it is the case that the war started by Ganondorf in the video does indeed refer to an attack started by an escaped Ganondorf, then it wouldn't be too far-fetched to think that Link would have joined the Hyrulean soldiers in a fight against the Gerudo, since he did have experience fighting them. My guess is he possibly either enlisted with the Hyrulean army prior to Ganondorf's attack, or he didn't and joined the battle himself without enlisting. I'll explain why I think this later. If Link did join in this battle, then I believe that he died possibly fighting Ganondorf at either the Spirit Temple or another structure that would eventually become the Arbiter's grounds. It can actually be proven that a battle of some kind occurred here because of the presence of Stahl troops, who wear scale armor and have helmets. Gerudo warriors don't wear armor, unless you count the Iron Knuckle, who wears what appears to be full plate armor, nor do they use shields or wear helmets, unless of course you count the Iron Knuckle. Anyway, I say he died fighting Ganondorf because of the one pattern that we see every time there's a human incarnation of Ganondorf. He almost always has a phase where he cannot be defeated with any weapon aside from his own magic. Take, for example, the first phase of Ocarina of Time's final battle. Though you have the light arrows, they are completely ineffective until you strike Ganondorf with his own magic. Wind Waker's Ganondorf battle simply requires that he be hit with a light arrow, but it's still required to beat him. Also, if you notice, during each other phase of the Ganondorf battle in Twilight Princess, Ganondorf's weak spot is the wound in his chest. In fact, it's this wound that ultimately ends him. Because Link most likely wouldn't have the light arrows, despite acquiring them in Majora's Mask as a child, and certainly not the Master Sword, he would have had no way to truly defeat Ganondorf. Link is defeated by Ganondorf's hand, but Ganondorf is also weakened enough so that the Hyrulean soldiers can subdue and eventually chain him to the Mirror Chamber. The sages are called to carry out the execution by the king, or Zelda, knowing Ganondorf held powerful magic. Cue the failed execution scene and the centuries of peace that follow. The Gerudo, having been defeated, are more than likely exiled further back into the desert. I don't think they would have been outright destroyed given their return in the sequel to Twilight Princess, Four Swords Adventures. although they are actually friendly in this game, meaning that, if my theory is correct, Link would have probably killed Twinrova, since one of the former Carpenter prisoners comments in the adult era about how the Gerudo have become nicer since the defeat of Twinrova. This also means he probably would have had to fight Nabooru again, since she's brainwashed during the child era into serving Twinrova as an Iron Knuckle and isn't saved until 7 years later, or the adult era. But what about Link? He died, but so what? How does he become a Stalfos, and in that kind of armor? Well, my guess is that the armor is a suit of ceremonial armor that he was buried in. Even more compelling evidence is the fact that in no Zelda game has there ever been a Stalfos that has had a horned helmet, except for Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, which is, to date, the final game in the era of decline. This would actually make sense, since in A Link to the Past, some of the Knights of Hyrule, specifically the Ball and Chain soldiers, have horned helmets. The only time we see horned helmets on Hyrulean soldiers in the child era is, once again, on the Ball and Chain soldiers, but in the Four Swords Adventures, which happens after Twilight Princess. So it more than likely was ceremonial armor. Unable to pass down his secrets, he became a Stalfos, unable to rest. That's really all I can guess as to what happened to Link and the events between Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess. Though I'm sure you're wondering why, despite having said twice that the hero Shade's regret was about passing down his secrets, I haven't mentioned anything about his regrets of not being remembered as the hero of time, which actually is stated in the Hyrule Historia. Well, I pose a question to you. Why are the regrets of the hero's Shade eased after he teaches Link all of his secrets? Have you ever heard a story about a friend or a relative who has passed away? Then their memory lives on in that story. Even if they aren't specifically mentioned, if you hear about an event that happened in history that people you knew were involved in, then they are indeed remembered by you. Because the hero of time was able to pass down his abilities to his descendant, his son, then despite not having all of Hyrule honor his name, he would still be remembered for who he was by the descendants of the hero of Twilight. But hey, it's just a theory.